You may remember that earlier this year I drove the brand new DS3 Crossback for the very first time, and my initial impressions were good, but they were the petrol versions. What is this boutique inspired SUV like when you drop in a 1.5 litre diesel? Keep watching to find out. DS predicts that just 5% of buyers will opt for this engine, so you may wonder why it's even worth having. Well, as you would predict, this is the most frugal engine you can have for this car. On a combined run, it offers 62.7 mpg, although I have been able to squeeze out 70 mpg, although I will admit that was in more rural driving conditions as opposed to driving in or around town. In regard to emissions, this engine emits as little as 97 grams per kilometre of CO2, and in regard to VED, you'll be required to pay £150, and this car's got a BIK rating of 22%. The other reason why you might want to go for the diesel is the gearbox. This engine is mated to a 6-speed manual gearbox only, whereas the more powerful engines are mated to automatics. One more reason for choosing this engine is its torque. It offers 250 Newton meters, making it the torquiest engine out of the bunch, but I suppose that should come as little surprise as this is a diesel engine and the rest are petrol. As well as the 250 Newton meters of torque, I have at my disposal 102 horsepower, which on paper doesn't seem to be a lot of power, but would I say this engine feels particularly underpowered? No, I wouldn't. Of course, you've got that torque guiding you along, I should say, not gliding. But although this car does glide, but I will get onto that a little bit later. So yes, 102 horsepower on paper doesn't really sound like much, but at no point this week have I struggled for power or been incapable of performing an overtake. And on the whole, this engine is pretty responsive. However, if you want a bit more performance, you can of course have a look at one of the PureTech engines. So you've got the PureTech 100, which offers 101 horsepower, which is obviously less powerful than this engine. You've got the PureTech 130, which offers 131 horsepower, or you have the PureTech 155 engine, or 155 engine, which offers 155 horsepower. There will also be an all-electric version coming, which is called the E-Tense. It will offer 200 miles of range and can be charged to 80% in just half an hour. Now, in case you're wondering, this car cannot be had with four-wheel drive. It is strictly front-wheel drive only. Mind you, I suppose taking this off-road would be like wearing a pair of Jimmy Choos to do a ramble in a muddy field. You wouldn't do it, would you? It just wouldn't make sense. As I've mentioned, this engine can only be mated to a 6-speed manual gearbox. And let's talk about the gearbox. Now, regular viewers will probably anticipate what I am about to say. Well, like other PSA group cars, Citroën, Peugeot, etc., this does have a bit of a notchy gear change. Although, it does feel a bit smoother and a bit slicker than other PSA group cars I've driven, so this gearbox does feel a little bit better, and the gear change is actually okay. It's not amazing, but it does just about enough to satisfy me. One area that really does satisfy me though is the ride. The ride is fantastic, but there is a caveat here. I would thoroughly recommend you stick with the 17-inch alloys. Unless you can really avoid it, don't go for the 18-inch alloys because they do disrupt the ride a little bit and they do compromise it. Would I say a DS3 Crossback on 18-inch alloys is particularly uncomfortable? No, but it's not quite as easygoing. This car, the ride is superb. This simply glides over the tarmac. It's like I'm driving on silk. It is very, very, very pleasant, and it makes journeys pretty effortless, to be honest. But this obsession for comfort does have a bit of a negative effect on the chassis when it comes to handling. Well, as you can predict, you do get a bit more body roll compared to the likes of the Audi Q2. Would I say it feels really roly-poly in the corners? No, but it's not the most focused car going. For the most part, the handling isn't actually that bad. The steering is pretty well weighted, and I would also say it's reasonably direct as well. Now, yes, you don't get a lot of feedback, but you know, for this type of car, I suppose really that's pretty unsurprising. Now let's talk about the engine refinement. I'm doing 40 miles per hour down a 60 mile per hour road, cruising, and you can't hear the engine at all. What I can hear is a bit of tyre noise, which isn't overly intrusive, but you can notice it. Now, I won't lie, there are some vibrations coming through the steering wheel, the pedals and the gear lever. Are they a deal breaker? No. Are they an annoyance? No, but you may notice them. Let's put the brakes on for a few moments to discuss the styling. Many of you weren't a big fan of it when you watched my first drive video, so maybe this montage will help. Okay, so you may not be convinced, but I do like the look of this car. It's different, distinctive and, cliché alert, avant-garde. You've got LED daytime running lights inspired by pearls, you've got tapered headlights, and you've also got these wonderful flush-fitting door handles, which I do really like. Now, there is one design feature I don't much care for, and that's this kind of shark fin here, which it looks a bit out of place. What happened? Did the designer sneeze, or did they get distracted? Were they sketching away and they got offered a cup of coffee? Yeah, I'd love a cup of coffee. Oh, I've ruined my sketch. Oh, I'll leave it in and pretend it's meant to be like that. But you get my point. Yes, this design feature just looks a bit odd in my opinion, and it means that the rear window becomes rather small. I like the inside as well. Yes, some may say it is fussy, and I can understand why, but the inside, I think it is distinctive. Stepping inside, it feels like you've walked into a fancy boutique that sells nothing you can afford, yet you stand there and look at the price tag, pretending you are actually considering to buy the item. Yeah, looks great. Yeah, I'll come back for it later, knowing you won't come back for it later. But yes, the inside is a pleasing place to be. You've got pleasing squidgy materials in here, interesting shapes and intricate stitching. This stitching, by the way, it took DS a year to perfect, so be grateful. A lot of hard work has gone into it. Overall though, I think the DS3 Crossback is a pleasing car to look at, both inside and outside, and I think it's quite a stylish jam jar. Style is subjective, of course, so let's cover something more objective. Price. The DS3 Crossback starts from £21,555, ranging through to £32,455 with 5 trim levels available. Now you may think, oh, that's quite a lot of money for a jumped up Citroen, but guys, don't forget, this is no longer a Citroen. DS is a separate brand, so get that idea out of your heads. And for what it's worth, this car is cheaper than the Audi Q2 and the Mini Countryman. The model I have is the Prestige model, which sits in the middle of the range and has a starting price of £24,955. Standard features include 17-inch alloys, black leather seats, 10-inch touchscreen with 3D navigation and smartphone connectivity, dual-zone climate control, front and rear parking sensors, tinted rear windows, and a good host of safety features including lane departure warning and lane keep assist. That's the price covered. Time to move on to practicality. The DS3 Crossback may be cheaper than its rivals, but when it comes to space, it's not quite as competitive. Open up the tailgate. By doing so, you need to press a button just above the number plate, like so. The button's down here to give the tailgate a cleaner look. Open the tailgate up, and you will be greeted by 350 litres worth of space, which, to give you some kind of comparison, the Q2 offers 405 litres and the Countryman offers 450 litres. So yes, needless to say, this boot is lacking a little bit. But would I call it small? No, I wouldn't. However, there is a bit of a step into it. So if you have heavier items, shopping for example, or let's say you have an artisan cabinet, who knows, this is a fancy car after all. You don't know what people will put in here. But yes, if you have a heavy item, it may be a bit of a faff to get it up, over and into the boot. If you want more space, you can of course fold down the 60/40 rear seats to give you 1,050 litres, but the rear seats don't fold as flat as the Audi Q2, which may be a little bit annoying to some of you watching. But you do get a spare wheel as standard. Okay, it is a space saver spare wheel, but a spare wheel is a spare wheel. So let's move on to the rear. Now, as always, the driver's seat has been set for me. I'm 6'2", so I am of course a taller chap. So let me step in like so to see how I get on. Now, I won't lie, the space left behind for me isn't amazing. Knee room is pretty tight, if I'm going to be honest. Although leg room isn't too bad, I haven't got loads of it, but I think I could be relatively comfortable in here for a period of time, and the headroom isn't too bad either. I've got about 1 or 2 inches spare maybe. So, okay, not loads, but yes, it is enough for me. But what I will say, the back of this car does feel a little bit cramped and just a tad claustrophobic. Now, the black roof lining doesn't help because it makes it feel quite dingy in here, and because of the fancy design for the rear windows, it does mean they are quite small and they are tinted, so there's not much light coming into the back here. And yes, it does feel like I've been trapped against my will in a dungeon, if I'm going to be honest. Yeah, it's not ideal. Now, could you fit 3 adults in the back? If I'm honest, probably not. The middle seat is quite slim, and I think getting 3 adults abreast will be quite tricky. 3 children shouldn't be too much of an issue, but if you want to put adults in the back, I would say this car is best used as a 2+2. Now, the back doesn't have a lot of practicality or extra functions, so there's no ports to charge your phone or your tablet, which is a little bit annoying. There's no armrest in the middle, so there's no extra comfort or practicality of having cup holders in the armrest, because I don't have one. Now, I do have door bins, of course, but they aren't massive. I can just about fit a 500 milliliter bottle of drink in there, and that's pretty much all you could fit in there. You might be able to squeeze a chocolate bar down the side, but other than that, yes, not a great deal of space. Now, you do also have pockets in the back of the front seat, so you can pop a magazine or a map or whatever you may want to pop in there, providing it's slim. And you do also have a hook where you can hang up an item of clothing, and you do also have these fancy LED lights, which may be used for a bit of reading. But yes, overall, the back isn't disastrous, but it's not quite as spacious as you may want it to be. And from memory, I do believe the Audi Q2 I had 1 or 2 years back was a little bit more spacious in the back, and that did have a centre armrest, although with it being an Audi, that probably was an optional extra, but still, would have been nice to have one DS. Now, one last thing I will say, the door doesn't open that wide, so getting in or out may be a bit tricky for some. I'm not the most flexible guy, but I can just about do it. Right, onto the front. So, to finish with the front, as you would expect, there are a few cubbies in here, but not all of them are particularly big. Now, let's start with the door bins. The door bins do offer enough space. You can fit a 500 milliliter bottle of drink in there, but let me move my sweets. But there's no real cup holder in the door bin, so your bottle of drink would slide about, which may become a little bit annoying and, well, to be honest, a bit of a distraction whilst you are driving. You do have a bit of space left over, so I've got my packet of sweets here, which are actually almost empty. What can I say? I'm a man with a sweet tooth. So put my sweets in like so, and I've got a bit of space left over. You do have 2 cup holders in the middle. I put my bottle of drink in there, and thankfully, because they are sunken into the centre console, when you go to change gear, the bottle won't get in your way. Now, I really find it frustrating when manufacturers, car brands, they put the cup holders in the middle and then put them in such a place whereby if you put a bottle in them, every time you change gear, you hit the bottle or the bottle gets in your way. That's quite frustrating. I don't know why car manufacturers do that. Poor ergonomics. Anyway, back to this car before I digress into a rant. The cup holders in this car are pretty practical, and they've got little prongs in them to help keep the bottle in place, which is quite practical. You've got a little slot here where you can pop your smartphone, and this will wirelessly charge your phone, because I do have a wireless phone charging pad as an optional extra. In the middle, I do have a compartment underneath the centre armrest, which I must admit does offer a good amount of space. I've got a little tray in here where you can pop some loose change, or I've actually got a battery in there that can be removed like so. And the space in here is pretty decent. I've got one of my cameras in there with a bit of space left over. So yes, that is pretty decent. Let me pop that back like so and close it. You've also got a 12-volt socket here and a USB port. I know it's not storage, but I may as well mention it whilst I'm here. And last but not least, you do have a glove box, which, like other PSA group cars, is pretty small. Yeah, you can't really fit a lot in there. Now, the reason for this is because when the cars get made for right-hand drive, Citroën, Peugeot and DS they don't move the fuse box, so it remains on the left-hand side, meaning that us Brits or anyone else who gets a right-hand drive car gets a pretty pokey glove box. But I can fit my packet of sweets in there, although let's face it, it's not a very large item. And I've got some space left over. Marvellous. Right, so let's talk about getting a good driving position. Now, for me, this is an area which has been a little bit tricky. Now, the steering wheel adjusts for rake and reach like so, if I can find the lever. There we go. And my driver's seat is also electronically adjustable, which is fantastic. However, for my height, I'm 6'2", as I mentioned a few moments ago when I was in the back. For my height, I would like the steering wheel to be a little bit higher, purely because when I get in or out the car, I have to be careful not to bang my left knee onto the steering column. Now, the obvious fix for that is to simply lower my seat. But when I lower my seat, I find my knees are bent at an uncomfortable angle. So I have to sit a little bit higher to take the stress and pressure off my knees. But it means that I have to be careful when I get in or out of the car. But that is more of a personal complaint. There's a good chance it won't affect you, not unless you happen to be 6'2". One more gripe, just whilst I want to finish off here. The dial, the stalk for the cruise control. No matter what PSA group car I drive, I always find this little stalk is too close to my left knee. So when I'm changing gear, if it's a manual car, of course, I do find that sometimes I tend to knock it, which is a little bit annoying. So on the whole, I must admit, I did find it tricky to get a comfortable driving position, but I wouldn't worry too much. There's a good chance it won't affect you. I'm just fussy. Let's finish with safety. Euro NCAP recently crash tested the DS3 Crossback and awarded it 4 stars, but that can be bumped up to 5 stars if you opt for the advanced safety pack. Standard safety features include 6 airbags, autonomous emergency braking, lane keep assist, lane departure warning, speed limit recognition and intelligent speed adaptation. So just in case you want a few more safety features for that extra peace of mind, there are of course a few options you can select. So this car has got the premium safety pack. Oh, speaking of safety, there is an ambulance. Stay safe, kids. So this car has got the premium safety pack. This means I've got adaptive cruise control, I've got active blind spot monitoring, extended lane keep assist, extended traffic sign recognition, and I've also got extended autonomous emergency braking. And what that basically means is the autonomous emergency braking in this car is able to work at night, and it's also able to pick up pedestrians as well. I think there is a fair amount to like about the new DS3 Crossback, although the looks won't be for everybody, but at least it's distinctive, it will stand out in a crowd. As well as artisan styling, it also offers a comfortable ride, good levels of refinement, and a generous amount of kit and safety. The only drawbacks are the fact that it's not quite as spacious as its rivals, and I think some buyers may be hesitant to put this amount of money into this brand as opposed to Audi or Mini. But DS is all about being different, and the 3 Crossback is a perfect example of that if you ask me. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have enjoyed it. If so, please do give it a massive thumbs up. If you are subscribed, please don't forget to click that bell icon so you get notified every time I make a video. And if you aren't subscribed, guys, what are you waiting for? Be sure to subscribe for more car obsession.
Little.